Hello, I'm Alma Angeles. We're moving to the next stage of the pandemic, and as the world resets to the new normal, we find ourselves seeking the right balance between health and livelihood, constantly adjusting the boundaries between liberty and responsibility. And now to the news. First, Hong Kong pro-democracy media tycoon Jimmy Lai was arrested on Monday and led in handcuffs through his newspaper office as police raided the building, part of a sweeping crackdown on dissent since China imposed a security law on the city. Take a look. Lai, 71 years old, was among 7 people detained on suspicion of colluding with foreign forces, one of the new national security offenses, and fraud in an operation targeting his next digital publishing group. It was the latest police operation against dissidents under the sweeping new law introduced at the end of June. 2 of Lai's sons were among those detained, according to a police source. The most serious national security crimes carry up to life in jail. Apple staff were ordered to leave their seats and line up so police could check their identities as officers conducted searches across the newsroom. The security law was introduced in a bid to quell last year's huge and often violent pro-democracy protests, and authorities have since wielded their new powers to pursue the city's democracy camp, sparking criticism from Western nations and sanctions from the U.S. Lai's Apple Daily and Next magazine are unapologetically pro-democracy and critical of Beijing, and they are enormously popular but funded almost entirely out of Lai's pocket because few companies dare advertise with them lest they incur Beijing's wrath. Beijing's new law targets secession, subversion, terrorism, and colluding with foreign forces. Both China and Hong Kong have said it will not affect freedoms and only targets a minority. But its broadly worded provisions criminalize certain political speech overnight, such as advocating sanctions, greater autonomy, or independence for Hong Kong. Critics, including many Western nations, believe the law has ended the key liberties and autonomy that Beijing promised Hong Kong could keep after its 1997 handover by Britain. Washington last week responded by imposing sanctions on a group of Chinese and Hong Kong officials, including the city's leader, Carrie Lam. A U.S. cabinet member met Taiwan's leader Monday during the highest-level visit from the United States since it switched diplomatic recognition from the island to China in 1979, a trip that Beijing has condemned. Health Secretary Alex Azar is in Taipei for a 3-day visit to promote shared democratic values and the island's success in taming the coronavirus. On Monday morning, Azar met President Tsai Ing-wen, who advocates the island being recognized as a sovereign nation and is loathed by Chinese leaders. Take a look.
Since the release of the Taiwan-U.S. joint statement on a partnership against coronavirus this March, we have continued to strengthen cooperation on exchanges of anti-pandemic supplies and the R&D and production of vaccines and drugs. When the people of Taiwan saw footage of White House officials wearing made-in-Taiwan masks, they were happy that these products were helping people in partner countries. Your visit represents a huge step forward in anti-pandemic cooperation between our countries.
Taiwan's response to COVID-19 has been among the most successful in the world, and that is a tribute to the open, transparent, democratic nature of Taiwan's society and culture. Taiwan had tremendous success in detecting COVID-19, managing the outbreak, and sharing this valuable information with other nations.
The American Institute in Taiwan and the Taipei Economic and Cultural Representative Office in the U.S. also signed a Memorandum of Understanding in Health Cooperation. U.S. Health Secretary Alex Azar and counterpart Chen Shih-chung witnessed the signing. Taiwan has become a poster child for defeating the coronavirus thanks to a well-honed track and tracing program, as well as firm border controls. Despite its proximity and economic links to China, it has recorded fewer than 500 infections and 7 deaths. Washington remains the leading arms supplier also to Taiwan, but has historically been cautious in holding official contacts with it. Throughout the 1990s, the U.S. sent trade officials to Taiwan with regularity. Douglas Powell, a former head of the American Institute in Taiwan, Washington's de facto embassy, said the Trump administration was still paying heed to China's red line that no U.S. official handling national security visit Taiwan. The difference, though, this time, he said, is the context, with Azar traveling at a time when relations between Washington and Beijing have hit a new low. In a related news, U.S. Secretary of Health and Human Services Alex Azar, the most senior U.S. cabinet minister to visit Taiwan since 1979, brushed off China's criticism when asked about Beijing's anger over his visit. Take a look.
A representative from different departments of government.
This visit represents an acknowledgement of the United States and Taiwan's deep friendship and partnership across security, economic, healthcare, and democratic, open, transparent values. And so on behalf of President Trump, I am here to highlight the importance of Taiwan in the international public health community, the contributions that it has made and can make, and of course, the close partnership and friendship between the United States and Taiwan.
Azar has previously been critical of Beijing's response to the coronavirus, which began in central China, as well as the WHO. It was a theme he repeated on Monday, saying Taiwan was wise not to trust some of the assertions coming from Beijing or the WHO. Meanwhile, China on Monday sanctioned 11 Americans, including Senators Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz, in retaliation for similar U.S. moves prompted by Beijing's crackdown in Hong Kong. Washington last week accused 11 officials of suppressing freedom and democratic processes in Hong Kong, including city leader Carrie Lam, and announced plans to freeze their U.S. assets. It was the toughest U.S. action yet in response to Beijing's introduction of a sweeping and controversial new national security law for the territory. Now, Beijing said the measure was a violation of international law and grossly interferes in China's internal affairs. Republican Senators Rubio and Cruz established themselves as two of the most vocal supporters of Hong Kong's democracy movement last year, when the city was convulsed by huge and sometimes violent protests. Beijing has accused external forces of fomenting unrest and responded to the unrest by imposing the security law in late June, sending a political chill through the semi-autonomous finance hub. President Trump on Thursday ordered Americans also to stop doing business within 45 days with popular Chinese apps WeChat and TikTok. The order claimed TikTok could be used by China to track the locations of federal employees, build dossiers on people for blackmail, and conduct corporate espionage. In other news now, 2 members of Lebanon's government have quit, or 3 members now have quit over a deadly blast that unleashed public rage against the country's ruling class, with protesters and police fighting running battles in the capital for a second day. As hopes faded of finding any survivors of Tuesday's explosion, Information Minister Manal Abdel Samad and Environment Minister Damianos Qatar both announced their resignations on Sunday in a further hit to the embattled government of Prime Minister Hassan Diab. Calling the explosion an enormous catastrophe, Qatar said he had lost hope in a sterile regime that botched several opportunities. Several MPs also quit, and local media reported Diab was mulling announcing the entire government's resignation a day after protesters briefly occupied and ransacked government ministries. Hundreds gathered again in and around Martyrs Square, a short walk from the port where the devastating explosion occurred, killing at least 158 people and injuring a staggering 6,000, many bloodied by flying gas. Now, police later fired tear gas in an attempt to disperse the protesters, who hurled stones and let off fireworks near a street leading to the parliament. While it's not known what started the fire that set off a huge stockpile of ammonium nitrate, protesters say the disaster could not have happened without the corruption and incompetence that have come to define Lebanon's ruling class. On Sunday, French President Emmanuel Macron oversaw a UN-backed virtual donor conference that pledged 250 million euros or 294 million US dollars in aid for the cash-strapped country, where some 300,000 people were rendered homeless by the disaster. In a joint statement, donors pledged the assistance would be directly delivered to the Lebanese population under the supervision of the UN. The UN said about $170 million would be needed over the next 3 months for health services, emergency shelter, food distribution, and programs to prevent the further spread of COVID-19, among other interventions. The donors also offered support for an impartial, credible, and independent inquiry into the disaster, something Lebanese President Michel Aoun has dismissed, saying it would only dilute the truth. U.S. President Donald Trump urged Lebanese authorities to conduct a full and transparent investigation in which the U.S. stands ready to assist. NHS workers were demonstrating in London calling for better pay. Joining us live from the United Kingdom to bring us that news is Jennifer Ringwood. Jennifer?
Hi, Alma. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Jen. Go ahead.
Hi. So I found these, some of my sources are the union Unite and workersliberty.org. So it's been labelled as NHS Workers' Day of Action. Thousands of NHS workers across the United Kingdom took to the streets on Saturday, the 8th of August, in the growing campaign for pay justice for health service workers. In the latest round of public sector pay rises, it seems that the NHS workers were overlooked, despite more than 500 NHS and social care staff dying from COVID-19. In order for the government to see the depth of discontent and frustration of NHS staff who continue to be on the front line in the battle against COVID-19, the Union Unite, which has 100,000 members in the health service, has supported its members to attend a socially distanced protest. The aim from the Union Unite is to seek a substantial pay increase for its members. The demonstration in London started at 11 a.m. at St James's Park, with protesters marching along Whitehall to Downing Street and ending with a rally at Parliament Square. Stewards were on hand to see that social distancing measures were observed.
He's not actually doing anything about it, just clapping.
Given he was actually in intensive care in St Thomas's, and he's said he was very grateful, and even named the nurses in particular who provided him very passionate care, as we all do to all our patients, and yet in the same breath he represents the establishment of conservative austerity that's been for the last 10 years. And in that austerity, we've had, in real terms, a 20% pay cut, despite this supposed pay deal, which happened in 2018.
I mean, you know, there's a budget out there. There isn't an unlimited pot of money, but at the same time, we still have to have our worth. The MPs have had a pay rise. They've also had a pay rise to the other public sector, such as teachers, the police. So yes, we need our worth.
And I've heard so we're asking for a 15% pay rise, and the reason we're asking for it is it's not just about money in our pocket. We've got 42,000 vacancies of nurses in England's NHS. We can't do the job that we were trained to do. We can't deliver the service that we've got to deliver. We are on our knees with fatigue after COVID, and we need a pay rise to defend the NHS. We need to be able to attract and retain staff in the NHS.
I'm very, very shocked, And I think Boris should be doing something about it, considering he went on and on about how amazing his healthcare staff were, how amazing the doctors and the nurses were, but he's not practicing what he preaches. He's not actually doing anything about it, just clapping.
Last month, Chancellor Rishi Sunak awarded up to a 3.1% pay rise for 900,000 public sector workers, including doctors, teachers, police officers. Unite had accused the Chancellor of having a selective memory when it comes to public sector pay, rewarding some but ignoring hundreds of thousands of others. Unite National Officer for Health, Jackie Williams, said, "Nursing staff and other allied health professionals have reacted with anger to being overlooked when pay rises were given to many in the public sector last month, and the government not hearing the health trade unions' call to bring their pay rise forward from April 2021. So this taken from workersliberty.org. In a decade of Tory austerity, NHS staff has seen their pay cut by 20% in real terms, and no amount of Thursday evening clapping and warm ministerial words can compensate for this dramatic loss in income. Poor rates of pay have contributed to the estimated 100,000 vacancies in the NHS and ensuing recruitment and retention crisis. Unite has joined 13 other health unions and professional organisations in the campaign to demand that pay talks start as soon as possible out of respect for the dedicated NHS staff who have battled COVID-19. Unite said that the last 3-year pay deal, which ends in April 2021, had started to rectify the pay deficit, but this now needs to be substantially built on. Back to you, Alma.
All right, so this is not just about financial recognition, is it?
No, I mean, traditionally, in my lifetime, NHS, they're very reluctant to strike. You don't see them striking that often. And I don't think this is just a financial protest. It's just 10 years of austerity. That's a decade of fixed pay while groceries, fuel prices, fuel prices, etc., are rising. The healthcare system in general has been hammered by the pandemic, and I think it's obvious that the physical and emotional effects of their daily work and the threat of a second wave looming is fueling their needs to demand a better standard of living. They've obviously, I mean, some of them have been isolating from their family and are still doing this in some parts of the country. It just seems fair.
All right. Thank you very much, Jennifer, for your update there in the United Kingdom, and looking forward for more updates coming from you and your country. Stay safe, stay healthy.
Thank you, Alma. From United Kingdom Bureau of EBC, I'm Jennifer Ringwood, and we live in interesting times.
And we go now to Australia. Let's look at the coronavirus situation in Australia. Joining us live is Alisa Ventura. Hello, Alisa.
Hello, Alma.
Hello. Go ahead, Alisa.
Yep. We are bringing you the latest updates on the COVID-19 crisis in Australia. According to the Johns Hopkins University of Medicine, as of 6:40 p.m. of Australian Eastern Standard Time, today, 10th of August 2020, there has been 21,397 confirmed total cases of COVID-19 here in Australia, up by 313 new cases within the last 24 hours. Victoria holds the highest number of recorded cases at 14,957, followed by New South Wales at 3,875 and Queensland at 1,089 cases. Out of the confirmed Australian cases, 313 people have died from the disease. As of 9 p.m., August 9, 2020, there has been approximately 5 million tests conducted nationwide here in Australia, with 0.4% of the tests returned with a positive result. Here in Queensland, due to the increasing cases from neighbouring states, interstate border closures were implemented to maintain the rate of interstate acquired cases. A Queensland border declaration pass is required to be granted entrance to the state. Moreover, anyone who has been in a COVID-19 hotspots, which includes all of Victoria, New South Wales, and Australian Capital Territory, in the previous 14 days are not allowed to travel to the state by road. As of 1 a.m., August 8, 2020, Queensland border restrictions has tightened. This meant that those who can travel to Queensland are truck drivers, workers related to transport of freight and logistics, people performing essential activities in border zone residents. On a positive note, Alma, fever clinics and pop-up testing clinics are still up and running here in Queensland. Here in the city of Townsville, a new pop-up testing clinic was set up last Thursday on 6th of August 2020. Those who have felt any of the COVID-19 symptoms such as fever, cough, sore throat, shortness of breath, runny nose, fatigue, and loss of smell or taste, no matter how mild, are encouraged to get tested. That's all for Australia. Back to you, Alma.
Okay. Alisa, can you update us on the situation of our frontline workers over there in Australia? How are they and how are they coping?
Yep, they're doing really fine because fortunately here in northern Queensland, we're in a better situation with we don't have much cases so far. And regarding to facilities, they have also been implementing the social distancing rules. We have our chairs set apart, more hand hygiene stations, and also for patients that want to come in to get themselves checked, whoever got a flu-like symptoms such as cough, fever, flu, or cold are asked to stay in their cars, and the doctor will check them in their cars as well. And we also have our respiratory and our respiratory equipment, so such as like spirometry, the one that you use to test your lungs with, and some nebulizers and like oxygen masks have been sort of we have stopped using them because of to limit the amount of transmissions we can do, because of the COVID itself can be transmitted through droplets from the air that we breathe out.
What is the most challenging problem you've encountered? You are in the health industry, aren't you? And
yes, Alma.
Yes, go ahead. Can you tell us what's the most challenging thing that you've faced so far?
The most challenging thing that I've faced so far is that people, some of them are not aware that how serious the situation is. People will just sometimes walk in a desk and ask for directions, and then I'll just find out later on that they're gonna have to be tested for COVID, even though they might show up negative, but we still have to put some precautions on. That's why we have precautions on to limit the amount of cases that we will have in the future.
All right. Okay, thank you so much. You do take care. You stay safe and stay healthy, and looking forward for more updates from Australia. Thank you, Alisa.
Thank you, Alma. This is Alisa Ventura from Townsville, Australia. We live in interesting times.
In the related news, Australia's worst-hit state of Victoria reported 19 coronavirus deaths. Victoria State, of which Melbourne is the capital, reported 19 deaths on Monday. Victoria has now seen about two-thirds of Australia's total 314 deaths and approximately 21,400 cases. The figure takes the state's death toll to 229 and the national total to 314. 14 of the 19 deaths were residents in aged care. The people who died were one man in his 50s, one woman in her 60s, two men in their 70s, one man and six women in their 80s, and one male and seven women in their 90s. Melbourne's second lockdown began over a month ago, but residents have been subject to a nighttime curfew and stricter requirements since August 3. Under Stage 4 restrictions, non-essential businesses have been forced to close, and essential businesses such as meat packing have been ordered to reduce the number of staff working at one time. And face masks became compulsory in tourist hotspots in Paris on Monday, amid warnings of a resurgence of coronavirus cases as infections in the world's worst-hit country, the United States, topped 5 million. Now, the requirement came as France, along with much of Western Europe, sweltered in a heat wave with temperatures soaring above 35 degrees Celsius or 95 degrees Fahrenheit. The blistering heat sent crowds flocking to the beaches at the weekend despite health warnings about the risk of infection. People in Paris, age 11 and over, are now required to wear the masks in crowded areas and tourist hotspots. Now, these include the banks of the Seine River and more than 100 streets in the French capital, including tourist destinations like Montmartre, where the Sacré-Cœur Basilica is located. Several French towns and cities have already introduced similar measures, as well as parts of Belgium, the Netherlands, Romania, and Spain. All the indicators show that since mid-July, the virus is again circulating more actively in the Paris region, according to a police statement at the weekend. Now, the novel coronavirus has already killed at least 731,570 people since the outbreak emerged in China last December, according to a tally from official sources compiled by AFP at 1100 GMT on Monday. At least 19,877,261 cases have been registered in 196 countries and territories. Of these, at least 11,879,100 are now considered recovered. The tallies using data from the Johns Hopkins University and AFP from national authorities and information from the World Health Organization also probably reflect only a fraction of the actual number of infections. Many countries are testing only symptomatic cases or the more serious. On Sunday, 4,117 new deaths, 213,167 new cases were recorded worldwide. The countries with the most deaths were India with 1,007, followed by Brazil with 572 and the US with 532. The US is the worst hit country with a total of 162,938 deaths from 5,044,000 or 45,564 cases, 44,800 and at least 1,656,864 people have been declared recovered. Now, after the U.S., the hardest hit countries are Brazil with 101,049 deaths from 3,035,422 cases, Mexico with 52,298 from 480,278 cases, the United Kingdom with 46,574 deaths from 310,825 cases, and India with 44,386 deaths from 2,215,074 cases. WHO Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus gave a crystal clear message to suppress the virus as the number of registered cases of COVID-19 approaches 20 million and the number of deaths 750,000. Take a look.
I will hand it to Dr. Thank you very much.
This week, we will reach 20 million registered cases of COVID-19 and 750,000 deaths. Behind these statistics, there is a great deal of pain and suffering. In France, President Macron introduced compulsory masking in busy outdoor spaces of Paris in response to an increase in cases. Strong and precise measures like this, in combination with utilizing every tool at our disposal, are key to preventing any resurgence in disease and allowing societies to be reopened safely. My message is crystal clear. Suppress the virus. If we suppress the virus effectively, we can safely open up societies.
But there's some really good estimates out there that suggest that between 10 and 20% of cases are responsible for about 80% of transmission events. And that's really, really important. That supports the nature of the epidemiology of this virus and that it likes clusters. It likes these super spreading events. If we give this virus the opportunity to spread in these close settings, it will. So we have to prevent that from happening.
As new cases of COVID-19 continue to increase in Hawaii, state officials have made a last-minute adjustment on how public schools will start the new school year. Alfred Asenas has more on this, plus a recap of recent events in his part of the world. Alfred Asenas.
Hawaii's Department of Education this past Friday announced a modification to reopening plans for all public schools throughout Oahu Island in order to align with new safeguards and restrictions prompted by the increasing number of COVID-19 cases throughout the island. Starting on August 17, all Oahu public schools will be implementing full distance or virtual learning models. Faculty will train and prepare for this last-minute modification this coming week. DOE has also designed 3 phases for these schools throughout this island. Phase 1 will involve in-person training, and this will last from August 17 to 20. During the first week of school, students will physically return to campus on a coordinated and scheduled basis, determined by each individual school to connect with their teacher, receive training on the distance learning platforms, and address issues with connectivity and access to technology. Phase 2 involves Ready to Learn, which lasts from August 24 to September 11. For the remainder of the initial 4-week period, full distance learning will be implemented. Staff will report to their designated work sites for continued distance learning instruction. And the last phase, phase 3, which is a transition to blended learning, which will begin on September 14. Education Department will continue to closely monitor the situation and work with the Governor's Office as well as the Hawaii Department of Health, or DOH, to assess whether or not students can safely return to schools to conduct in-person learning. If distance learning will continue for the remainder of the first quarter, an announcement will be made on September 8. Now, schools on Kauai, Maui, and the Big Island will still reopen as originally scheduled on August 17, also with blended models. Here now is Superintendent Dr. Christina Kishimoto.
I appreciate the support and shared commitment of this plan from Governor David Ige, Health Director Bruce Anderson, State Epidemiologist Dr. Sarah Park, and Mayor Kirk Caldwell in accepting this proposal from our Oahu school leaders. Our complex area superintendents on Oahu pulled this plan together collaboratively. I'd like to address our public school students. You have been at the heart of every decision we faced. We know you are eager to see your teachers and friends again. We are excited to welcome you back and continue your education journey. And to our public school parents, please know that we remain committed to educating your children with high-quality learning opportunities.
As of this report, the Aloha State has reported 201 new cases of COVID-19, 200 alone on this island of Oahu and 1 on Maui, bringing to a statewide total of 3,115. Unfortunately, 2 more Oahu residents, both with pre-existing conditions and elderly, have lost their battle to the virus, resulting in a statewide total of 31. And just to recap the events for this week in this part of the world, and to recall, last weekend, the state government had encountered some reporting delays, which resulted to low case count initially, but had to be corrected the following Monday, which averaged about close to 100 or more per day. Also, this past Thursday, Governor David Ige announced the reinstatement of the 14-day mandatory self-quarantine for all inter-island travelers, particularly for those coming from this island to the other islands. Following that announcement by the governor, Honolulu Mayor Kirk Caldwell made the decision to close, once again, to close all beaches and parks throughout this island, beginning today up until September 4. Reporting from Honolulu, Hawaii, I'm Alfred Asenas, Eagle News. We live in interesting times. Back to you.
Thank you, Alfred. Eagle News will be right back.
Noon hanggang ngayon, Gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
Welcome back. Typhoon Jangmi dissipated off South Korea's eastern coast on Monday afternoon after it passed through the southern, eastern, or southeastern tip of the country. The National Weather Agency said it left limited damage, although torrential rains are likely to continue in some parts of the country into Tuesday. Torrential rains has wreaked a havoc across the country since the beginning of the month, leaving 42 people dead now or missing. Authorities have issued landslide warnings for 24 regions. At least 667 landslides have been reported so far in August. The Korea Meteorological Administration said the first typhoon to affect the country this season made landfall on the southeastern island of Jeoji at 2:50 p.m. Now, it weakened to an extratropical cyclone at around 5 p.m. while moving over 10 kilometers northwest of nearby Ulsan. No major damage has been reported. This year's monsoon season, which began on June 24 in the central region, has shown no signs of letting up, and it's likely to end later than August 10 record in 1987. The monsoon season is also expected to set a fresh record as the longest one after a 49-day record back in 2013. At least 43 bodies have been recovered after a massive landslide triggered by monsoon rain swept away dozens of tea estate workers in southwestern India. The landslide in Idukki district, around 250 kilometers from Kerala state capital Thiruvananthapuram, occurred Friday but the ongoing search and rescue efforts have been hampered by torrential downpours. The toll rose to 43 on Sunday afternoon. Idukki District's Police Chief Karupasamay said 26 of the bodies were recovered on Friday night, according to a police official earlier. Local media, meanwhile, reported that some 78 people were believed to live in the area, with many still missing. Kerala has been hit by deadly floods during the annual season. India's Civil Aviation Minister warned against speculation over the cause of a disaster in which at least 18 people died after an Air India Express jet overshot a runway in a storm and plunged down a bank. Take a look. Now, the plane's black box recorders have been recovered and will be examined as part of the investigation. Reports have said that the pilots made 2 attempts to land in the fierce winds and rain before crash, while opposition politicians highlighted warnings that had reportedly been made about the Kozhikode runway. Minister Hardeep Singh Puri acknowledged that issues had been routinely red flagged by the Civil Aviation Authority, but the runway used in the crash, but they had been addressed by the airport owner. Now, some 149 people were still in local hospitals after the crash of the special flight from Dubai to bring back Indians stranded by the coronavirus pandemic. The jet plunged more than 10 meters or 35 feet down an embankment and then broke in two. Rescue officials said it was a miracle that fuel that leaked did not catch fire. Kozhikode is considered a tricky airport as it is built on a hill and has a tabletop runway with a steep drop at one end. Indonesia's Mount Sinabung erupted on Monday, belching a massive column of ash and smoke 16,400 feet into the air and plunging local communities into darkness with a thick layer of debris. Take a look. The volcano on Sumatra Island has been rumbling since 2010, and it saw a deadly eruption in 2016. Activity had picked up in recent days, including a pair of smaller eruptions at the weekend. There were no reports of injuries or deaths from Monday morning's blast. but authorities warned of possible lava flows and more eruptions. However, the crater's alert status remained at its second highest level. No one lives inside a previously announced no-go zone around the volcano. Small communities nearby were coated in a layer of thick ash as at least one village went from day to night in a matter of minutes. The coronavirus pandemic complicated matters even as scared residents violated safety rules. Locals were gathering after the eruption without using face masks because they were all panicking, according to a local disaster agency chief named Nathaniel Perangin Angin. Sinabong had roared back to life in 2010 for the first time in 400 years. After another period of inactivity, it erupted once more in 2013, and it has remained highly active since. In 2016, 7 people died in one of the eruptions, while another in 2014 killed 16. In other news, the main challenger in Belarus's disputed election called on President Alexander Lukashenko to give up power on Monday after a fierce police crackdown on protesters saw dozens wounded and hundreds detained. Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, whose surprise candidacy is posing the biggest challenge to the veteran leader in years, said Sunday's presidential vote had been rigged and accused authorities of resorting to force to hold on to power.
Власть должна сейчас подумать о том, как мирным способом передать эту власть, понимаете, потому что на данный момент у них единственный способ – это насилие над людьми, над мирными белорусами.
За пределами нашей светлой Беларуси никогда не показывай пальцем в ее сторону. А нее эти люди, они дали показания, были...
Election officials confirmed Lukashenko's re-election to a sixth term on Monday morning, saying he had won with more than 80% of the vote, with Tikhanovskaya coming second with just under 10%. The 65-year-old former collective farm boss has ruled ex-Soviet Belarus since 1994, stamping out dissent and earning the nickname of Europe's last dictator. Russian President Vladimir Putin and Chinese leader Xi Jinping both quickly congratulated Lukashenko, but Poland called for an emergency European Union summit on the clashes. European governments questioned the results of Sunday's election, with the European Union calling for ballots to be accurately counted, Germany voicing strong doubts about the conduct of the vote, and Belarus's neighbor Poland calling for an emergency EU summit on the situation. Thousands took to the streets of Minsk and other cities on Sunday night to denounce the results, sparking clashes with police. Lukashenko has sought to boost his support by warning of outside threats and raising the specter of violent mobs. Anger toward Mr. Lukashenko's government has been in part fueled by the response to the coronavirus. The president has downplayed the outbreak, advising citizens to drink vodka and to use saunas to fight the disease. Belarus, which has a population of 9.5 million, has had nearly 70,000 confirmed cases and 600 deaths. And more updates as we follow this developing story in Lebanon. Lebanon finance minister has quit. It is the fourth resignation in the government. Now, Lebanon's Justice Minister Marie-Claude Najim, Information Minister Manal Abdel Samad, and Environment Minister Damianus Qatar have all resigned from their posts as well. A Lebanese judge has begun questioning the heads of the country's security agencies over last week's devastating blast in Beirut. Judge Ghassan El Khoury began questioning Major General Tony Saliba, the head of State of Security. According to state-run national news agency, it also gave no further details, but other generals are scheduled to be questioned. About 20 people have been detained over the blast, and as an update, more than 200 people are believed to have been killed by Tuesday's devastating explosion. And the Toronto Raptors are looking to defend their title with the restart of the NBA season. Sharita Sese reports from our Canada Bureau.
The wait is finally over for NBA fans as they were able to get their basketball fix with the restart of the 2019-2020 NBA season. With most of the fans and media counting out the reigning NBA champions, the Toronto Raptors are well underway to defend their title. The Raptors started off their season by facing LeBron James and the Los Angeles Lakers in what may be a potential NBA Finals matchup. Despite what many had to say about this team coming into this season, Toronto showed that they are more than just a Kawhi Leonard-led team. Star of opening night was OG Anunoby, whose primary goal was to contain LeBron James, and that he did. Anunoby limited LeBron to just 20 points, which is below his season average of 25.7 points per game. Not only did he contribute on the defensive end, but Anunoby put up 23 points and shot 88% from the field, going perfect from the free throw line and beyond the arc. But of course, the resilient Raptors team was led by their captain, Kyle Lowry, who opened the restart with 33 points and 14 rebounds, going to the line 15 times for the night. That momentum continued when they faced the Miami Heat just a couple days later, a team that the Raptors have not been able to beat this season. In usual Toronto fashion, it was next man up, and it was Fred VanVleet's turn as he finished the night with a career-high 36 points, shooting 50% from the field and perfect from the line. Current most improved player Pascal Siakam was also able to get his legs under him with 22 points and 6 rebounds in just 36 minutes of play. This was then followed by a repeat of their first-round meeting against the Orlando Magic, and the Raptors were able to once again take care of business, beating the Magic 109-99. With just a couple games under their belt, the Toronto Raptors are undefeated and have many people changing their minds about who will come out of the East. But as games continue on in the bubble, the current champions continue to poise themselves as examples to follow when it comes to using their platforms to amplify a bigger message. This all started when the team arrived at the Disney bubble with Black Lives Matter written on their team bus, and they have continued to share their message any chance they get. From the masks they wear to their backdrop during media availability and their pre-game outfit, the team continues to be united in their fight for equality. From Toronto, Canada, Zarita Sese, Eagle News, we live in interesting times.
In other news, first-time candidates garnered winning votes during Hawaii's primary elections. Alfred Asenas is back with this report. And finally, in our news, the Iglesia Ni Cristo donated thousands of bottles of vitamin C tablets to the needy, to the much-needed vitamins for this pandemic. Kathleen Cruz reports from our EBC Canada Bureau. Kathleen.
Members of the Iglesia Ni Cristo Church of Christ across Canada recently had an Aid to Humanity project, wherein thousands of bottles of vitamin C tablets were donated.
Through their Christian duty, motivated by their faith and love for their fellow men in these times of pandemic, boxes of vitamin C bottles will bound to the Philippines. Here is Iglesia Ni Cristo Minister of Gospel, Brother Muriel Cadasio, explains who extended their help to provide the vitamins.
This was donated by the brethren here in the district of British Columbia, Canada. But the truth is, it is a Canada-wide donation. So we were able to donate tens of thousands of vitamins in order to help our fellow men who need it, and those who are sick, and specifically it will be donated in the Philippines. So there are so many. Almost all of the brethren unite in this campaign, and to the guidance, like what they mentioned, to the guidance of the Executive Minister of the Church, Brother Eduardo V. Manalo.
Brother Muriel also explains the beneficiaries of these donations and how they will receive it in the Philippines.
Those who will benefit from this are some of our fellow men in the Philippines, especially right now that there is a pandemic, and that's why all the vitamins is bound to the Philippines. Actually, it is all packed and it is ready for shipment, and one of these days, within this week, it will be shipped to the Philippines, and we're certain that it will really help many people in the Philippines, brethren or members of the Church of Christ, and even non-members of the Church of Christ. Everyone will benefit from this.
Asked about why Iglesia Ni Cristo continues to conduct aid to humanity efforts.
The reason is because this is the commandments of our Almighty God written in the Bible. And as you observe, members of the Church of Christ, we always follow the teachings, the commandments of our God and of our Lord Jesus Christ written in the Holy Scriptures. That's why we donate, we conduct Aid to Humanity program inside the Church of Christ, helping those who are in need, helping those who are poor, helping those who cannot afford to, for example, the vitamin C. And we know that it will really help them. And this is part of our duty as members of the Church of Christ, as we firmly believe this is God's command written in the Holy Scriptures.
In Vancouver, Kathleen Cruz, Eagle News. We live in interesting times.
Thank you, Kathleen. Before we close, we leave you with a word of hope. At the end of the day, there remains so much more to be grateful for. See you again tomorrow evening. Good night. I'm Alma Angeles. We live in interesting times.